Uh, hello everybody. We are back with another guest feature. Jay today is at the moment not being able to join us, but he says he'll try to join us later in the episode. Till then, today we have a fairly interesting topic, and I have a guest today with us. Her name is Yashika, who has done her PGP at in public policy at the Takshila Institution, where she specialized in land reforms in Haryana as her policy capstone project. And I feel like there's no better time to do this right now because as we go by our days, I live in Gurgaon, and the issues around municipal planning, urban planning, and real estate regulations in Gurgaon are just increasing, especially with a sort of a weakening of the social infrastructure here. So, Yashika, why don't you just introduce yourself, your background, and what interested you in these topics, and then we'll take the conversation forward.
Yes, so hi everybody, and thank you for having me. So, I basically did my undergrad in commerce from Delhi University, and after that, I did my post graduation in public policy from Takshashila Institute, where, as a part of an academic exercise, we were supposed to write a capstone policy brief. So I chose this topic of land reforms in Haryana, and I feel that it's extremely relevant because land is a factor of production. And if we see that the land is not being utilized to its full potential, if it's not being utilized to its full efficiency, we see that a factor of production is not being utilized to its full efficiency. So I felt that if India, if we are aiming at becoming an economic superpower, we should somehow be able to find ways to utilize our land also to its fullest of potential. So that's why I think I chose this topic.
Right. So I just want to know that when you were engaged in like this study and all of that, and I'm not trying to like interview you, I'm just curious about this. That did you find like a lot of like say outdated land records or inaccurate land records that have just sort of made their way into the systems? Did you like probe the legal issues that were arising out of this? Do you have some findings that you can share with us? Because this is the disputes will also weaken our ability to build up economic potential. It will weaken our ability to sort of build up any kind of physical or social infrastructure also. I primarily think it's one of the causes why even the road infrastructure in Gurgaon is so bad, but we'll get back to that later. So yeah.
Yes, so yes, you're right that there were a lot of old, outdated land records that I came across, and the reason why why most of this was, most of these old land records made their way to our current system, and why anybody who's trying to invest in land in Haryana, why they're facing this issue, and not just Haryana, I feel it's across the country, is because that our land record management system is a bit outdated. I mean, obviously, the government has come up with a lot of initiatives like digital land record management system, and they're trying to digitize a lot of our land records. But uh, there already exists so many problems in the way the land records are managed in our country. First of all, in our country, we follow a presumptive land titling system, which is basically that uh, whenever there's a land buying or selling that takes place, instead of recording that, if suppose I am selling you a piece of land, instead of recording that you are now the owner of the land, the government ensuring your ownership of the land, the record will document the transaction. So that's a presumptive land ownership that is taking place. So that can be contested. What if someone just one day comes up and says that, oh, the land never belonged to me in the first place? How can I go ahead and sell it to somebody else? Now, this is not a new problem. This is an age-old problem. So this has continued to exist in our system, and it perpetuates for decades, and then these disputes, they uh, they take decades to get resolved in our judicial system. And like I said, because land is a factor of production, there's a lot of productivity that gets halted because of
Yeah.
such long disputes.
I feel like it's in some ways related to crime also. I did an episode on this in Bihar also, like not physically in Bihar, but our feature was based on Bihar. And the gentleman we were hosting on that, he said that I can almost statistically say that 80 to 85% of the crimes that I've tracked, he was working at a social impact kind of organization. That the crimes that he's tracked were probably all sort of somehow or the other related to land disputes and all of that. I think the way the land ownership works in India, and you hit the nail on the head that the burden of proving land ownership is on transactional detail, right? So you prove land ownership through a history of recording transactions कि इनकी रजिस्ट्री हुई फिर इनकी रजिस्ट्री हुई और अब मैं so and then the laws. I also find the legal authority is kind of overarching here. Municipal corporations will issue this document, the registrar will issue this document. So, and then sometimes some people will have multiple people will have POAs on the same land. So, I think what happens is that land parcels become fragmented so badly that the scope for dispute is almost uh, it's inevitable. I won't even say that scope for dispute is there. It can turn even two very non-confrontational brothers into arch enemies. So that's just a simplistic way of looking at it. But take us through how you think that this is related to the economy and politics of the state and all of that. So yeah.
This actually reminds me of something that our Madhavan from PRS, he once said that, and it's obviously just an exaggeration of this. It was supposed to be a joke, but he once said that one day maybe I can just sell you the Parliament building, and nobody's
Mhm.
going to check that if that building even belongs to me. Like they're just
Mhm.
going to check that oh there was a transaction, money was exchanged, so now that building belongs to you. Nobody cares if that building belonged to me in the first place. So now like through, and I think there's a movie also based on it. I'm not sure what the name is, but yeah. So this is a problem, and why I think that again dispute resolution becomes so very difficult because of this. uh, and see the thing is that when land records are maintained, broadly speaking, this is a very broad categorization of land records. Basically, there are three kinds of land records that are maintained, and it's actually similar throughout the country. The name of these land records might be different, and the names of the department might be different. But broadly speaking, there are three kinds of land records that are maintained. One is the sales deed, and the other one is the record of the right, and then there are spatial records, which is like maps and boundary records, all that. So there are three different departments responsible for that. So basic, which is fair. Okay, so these are three different kinds of jobs. So three different departments for that. But the problem arises when, for example, there's a change that takes place in one of these departments, and one of these records have been updated. But then there's no surety that the change gets updated in all the three kinds of records.
Mhm.
So there's a change now in one of the kind of records, and then about the same piece of land, and then that doesn't get updated. So that's a problem. And why this is a problem for our economy, for the policy, and just for the state in general is because uh, when people who are trying to invest in land, large corporations who need to set up, especially corporations including, like you said, warehousing and large industries and logistical industries, they need large pieces of land.
Right.
And when there are fragmented lands and land titles are disputed, they lose confidence over their land. They are very hesitant to come over to that place, buy that land, because they do not want to start their operations on a piece of land that maybe after 5-10 years somebody comes up and claims their land.
Yeah.
So it becomes very difficult for the investors to trust and put in their money in that area where land disputes are not resolved for such long periods of time.
Yeah.
And Again, with farmers, when you have such small fragmented pieces of land, your productivity is very, very low. So your
Hmm.
income that comes from that farm piece of land is extremely low. And that is a huge problem, especially in Haryana, because in Haryana, uh, so there's a statistics which says that close to 93% of land in Haryana is cropped. And out of that 93% of land, close to 92% or maybe 96, I'm not sure, it's irrigated, which clearly means that there's a lot of resources that are invested in agriculture.
Yeah, also, this is hard to estimate, right? Sorry to interrupt you, but
Yes.
this is hard to estimate on what exactly the figures of irrigation are. And also, because if such large tracts of lands are being irrigated, because Haryana is also probably a state that grows very water intensive crops. So, it's related to heavy water usage and heavy electricity usage, which in turn ties into you paying extra to provide free electricity to the farmers. So it's just tied to so many extra like public policy issues. But we'll just come back to that maybe in another episode or something. But yeah, sorry for your interruption, but
Yes,
please
that
carry
water intensive crop growing system, that's another issue in itself.
on.
But yes, so because there are such small pieces, fragmented pieces of land with those farmers, but there's such a large investment that goes in, the income that comes out of those farms is extremely, extremely skewed. So those that is why agriculture is actually also called a necessary evil, because for decades people have had that piece of land, their forefathers have been growing crops there, they continue to do that, but again their income remain low there. And if you try to deploy some sort of technology to increase your productivity, that would not work, because in such small parcels of land, it's very, very expensive to deploy uh, good technology to be able to improve your fertility.
Right.
Yes, so in that way, both investors who are trying to move away from, trying to bring in infrastructural development in the state, they are not able to do that because land is under conflict, investment is under a lot of conflict, and then farmers again, they're tied with low income sources.
Right. I will speak a little bit about the assured income for farmers later. I was going through your work and I found something fairly interesting on the proposals and the suggestions that you've made. So I first want to talk about how, like you have, for example, proposed a setting up of an integrated land records management authority, something of that sort for the state. So we'll speak a little bit about that, and I just want to then pivot into where exactly you find are the areas where the potential in terms of economic growth of the state is sort of being locked. So, how we've already discussed this a little bit, but maybe we can put some figures to it or all of that. They need not be super accurate, they can be estimates also. So, let's just first start talking about the integrated land records management proposal that you have, because I personally found that fairly interesting. I do know that if it has to be implemented in reality, it will find a lot of resistance because no bureaucrat likes to give up power, and India is a country that's built on Babudam. But anyway, we'll still speak about this authority a little bit. So why don't you give me your brief
Yes,
about that?
so just like a disclaimer,
Yeah.
so for any policy pertaining to land
Hmm.
in Haryana, it's very, very important that the landowners see that policy as pro landowners, because landowners are extremely powerful people in Haryana. Anything that they see is against their profit making ability or is against them, that is not going to work, because they're not just powerful because they own land there. They're extremely influential. They have influence over the Haryana's bureaucracy, politics,
I'll
and
just interrupt you here. Sorry. I think they have existing influence over all of India's politics and bureaucracy
extremely.
because they also have the option of blocking all the highways that lead to Delhi,
Yes.
which, and I'm not even joking, I understand it because when you need some public policy intervention to go in your favor, I think, but I'm not justifying wild protesting, but you have to get it done by hook or by crook. So sorry, you were saying something.
Yes, so
Yeah.
political parties, they are extremely conscious about touching land because A, landowners are extremely powerful. If anything goes against them, even in short term, I mean, it's not going to work in the state. And then again, and land is very sensitive because people inherit it. People tie their identities with land. So anything that pertains to land, any policy that comes in the state, which is trying to improve land productivity, uh, huge stakeholder management has to happen there. So with that disclaimer, I actually so why I came up with this proposal of setting up an umbrella organization for maintaining land records is because, like I said earlier, uh, there are, broadly speaking, three different kinds of land records, right? And different departments are responsible for maintaining them. I'm not saying that, oh, just merge all those departments, because that's like a huge government. I mean, uh, those are they don't just maintain land records. There are also other functions that they perform. But when you digitize it, you have to maintain them in a manner that at least whenever a change is being updated in any of the kind of land records, it gets updated in real time in all of them. And whenever there is, especially when there are changes in terms of spatial land records, so it's not necessary that this is like a piece of land. If somebody is inheriting it, they directly inherit the entire piece of land. It gets broken into pieces, so those get updated in real time and in one single organization. Obviously there can't be like I mean, yes, there's going to be a lot of bureaucratic resistance because nobody's ready to adopt technology and nobody's ready to give up their powers. But uh, if you have a single integrated system through which also external parties, investors, they can refer to land records in a manner that they can trust. Okay, so the government is based, and like I said, so if you have to move from presumptive land titling to conclusive land titling, it's very, very important that your land records that are in place, they are all correct, they're all updated in real time.
Right.
The boundaries are clear. People are not disputing over the boundaries of land. And I feel it's not only going to, correct the land records. It's not, I mean, in a broader sense, if you look at it, even our judicial system, it is so burdened with the kind of land disputes that go into these courts every day. It's going to relieve them also from that burden. And again, like I said, that the land and the investment that is tied with such disputed land, that is going to free up with
Right. Right. You know,
better records. Yeah.
yeah, I think that this definitely maybe ties into areas where proposals exist within government. So it's not like they haven't acknowledged these problems. But for example, we have these issues of, say, Benami properties. So, there are maybe politicians or bureaucrats or business persons who have like some land inheritance which is maybe on somebody else's name, and then when you maybe digitize this beyond a point, you might lose hold over land that you have actually invested in. So that may be one area of realistic reasons as to why I find like these policies will find resistance, and even people who will advocate for them will be very careful while doing so. But I think there are proposals. For example, yeah, I used to read something about the bhu Aadhaar, which was like the like land linkage of your Aadhaar card to your like land documents, and obviously the DILRMP scheme, which anybody who follows record keeping of land will know about. So, were you able to realistically, when you were working on your capstone, sort of see where the realistic implementation is of these schemes? What is your view? Like, matlab, how much time will it take, or something of that sort? Can you estimate? Like,
Yes. So basically, if you look at a if you look at a practical example where this might have worked, not in its full swing, obviously, I'd say Andhra Pradesh is actually a very good example
hmm
because if you look at Amravati, for example, I feel that the reason why it was successful was because people were able to pool their land. And why was that possible? I mean, how can you even go ahead and pool your land when when you're not even clear that this land belongs to you?
Right.
So that was possible because they very early on started digitizing their land. And if you, I did try to estimate the time and the cost that this might incur.
The whole
So
exercise,
yes,
uh, on part of the state exchequer, I'm guessing, like the government will take up this exercise of sort of.
yes. So I mean, broadly speaking, uh, if you look at the time frame that it might take, it will be basically around 4 to 5 years, because first of all you have to set up the, I mean, obviously the physical infrastructure for setting up those offices, uh, and then the complete integration of all these kinds of land records, because it's not just recent land records. Gets passed on uh, through ages.
Hmm.
So it will take around 4 to 5 years, just the process of maintaining those land records. And one can only be able to see if that is, you know, we're getting the kind of results that we wanted to, in terms of the disputes getting resolved faster, more investment coming in. That is only a subsequent effect of all this. But just setting up and then scaling and then complete integration might take around 4 to 5 years.
Hmm.
That's the estimate that I had.
Okay. And
Yes.
this is, I mean, I always view this with a lens of skepticism, any government policy implementation. So we are just talking about, say, 4 to 5 years in the setting up framework. The
Yes.
effective implementation of this is another question. I always look at this with bit of skepticism also, because for land records to be updated on a digital system where more and more of our personal documents are being digitized. I am not contesting the morality of it. I think there are benefits of digitization, but more and more of your identities, identity cards, PAN numbers, Aadhaar numbers, when everything is being linked, and we are opening up the scope of maybe linking your land ownership to it also, we can't do that before we sort out the existing issues in land ownership. So first the existing titling issues need to be sorted out, otherwise our digital systems will also inherit this conflict or something. You will have maybe two people with the same land record showing up on their bhu aadhaar or whatever documents you have to use. And we also, if these start operating inefficiently, we also open the scope for bribery with the person who is responsible for updating these documents onto a digital platform. Because maybe, and we have had a lot of gains in India with digital literacy, but maybe there are still some miles to go. So if there are people who have inherited land who are maybe not that digitally literate, they can be bribed, they can be sort of pushed away from their rights. So there are all these, like, magnitude of questions we need to answer before we start, quote unquote, digitizing land records and issuing bhu Aadhaars, which I think are very similar to how some countries have a concept of a property card, I think. So, and this is, I think, partly the fault of our judiciary. Matlab, मैं हर चीज, I would don't want to blame on the government. There's a huge, like, burden of unsolved, like, land cases, which is tied to judicial reform. So, did you deal with the judiciary and the inefficiencies that it's causing with respect to our economy, the land related economy? Like, were you did you work on this in your capstone? And
Yes. So, yes, you're absolutely right. First of all, there's a whole issue. I mean, when you talk about digitization, yes, there's this question of, uh, obviously, when you link it with your Aadhaar and then identity cards, all that comes into picture. That is a different set of problems in itself, because yes, people, uh, they're hesitant about that, linking their Aadhaar to everything. But when you look at, see, for to be able to move to conclusive land titling, which is very, very important. I mean, land is an asset, and you spend so much money in purchasing that. And until you don't have conclusive land titling, as in the government does not tell you that, okay, this land belongs to you, uh, again, that trust can never come. So yes, linking it with other aspects of, again, then there's this whole uh, you know problem of how the government can use that data and everything. That's another set of issues. And then coming to your question about the problems within the judiciary itself and how they have, you know so for this I was trying to look at alternative dispute resolution mechanisms for land disputes.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem there was that land disputes don't exist in vacuum. Okay, so it's not just that a land dispute is occurring just about. I mean, a land dispute is not just about titles, about who owns this land. There are. It's also mostly like a. It is a civil case, so there are other issues that are, attached with land as well. So that cannot be separated entirely from the existing judicial mechanism. And yes, we're all aware of the kind of existing burden that the judiciary has with all the pending cases and everything. But if we try to take the alternate courts approach, uh, land is not something that is separated from civil, like it cannot be separated from the civil life as such. So that is something that becomes a problem when you look at alternative dispute
You know,
mechanisms.
I think that very odd comparison, and people might disagree with me, but I think that with a poor asset quality of Indian banking in the mid 2010s, I think an attempt with the NCLTs was also to sort of uh, let go of the locked potential and kind of release it by sorting out all the bankruptcy related cases, and the fact that taking them through the conventional judicial review would take a lot longer. I mean, that's kind of why anybody who's been involved in the NCLT tribunals, they've always said that the agenda was resolution at a mission mode, like and I don't know, maybe we can have if we have to be innovative about improvement of land records management and dispute resolution, maybe there can be a separate fast moving tribunal. uh, but this will have to be state to state, because the volume of land cases will just be so large. Obviously there will be so many issues with implementation of that, but there will come a point where you will have to do some innovative thinking, because the system that we have is not working currently. And I'm seeing the frustration of the people who stay in my close vicinity, because I am not too far from Golf Course Road, which is where people have paid hundreds of crores to get like one flat, and now everybody sees those news reports. And then you see the Golf Course Road basically start resembling the Yamuna after 130 millimeters of rainfall, which is it's not a cloud burst, it's not a flood, it's a minimum, just a minimum set of rain has sort of been exceeded, and our roads are looking like rivers. So why I feel like all of this is related is because in this near vicinity there are areas where colonies are disputed. So there, the funds which are allotted for their municipal functioning have been locked up by the orders of the respective courts. And so every colony, its developmental funds, it has some internal development funds, etc., etc., they all sort of get frozen. So municipal governance is not just down in the gutter, it's just non-existent. So except for private builders doing some basic checks and balances in parts of Gurgaon which are obviously more relevant to them, the municipal governance barely exists. And to our discredit, we hardly care about municipal elections. So I think that's one of the factors that we need to do more thinking about. So I just want to get your thoughts on this, then we'll
Yes.
maybe.
So when you talk about municipal governance, and you talk about, and at the same time, just such high prices of urban land and just urban housing in the state. So Gurbachan Singh, Professor Gurbachan Singh, he points out, he actually has a very good explanation for this. So
Hmm.
he says that till date, there exists a certain form of license permit quota raj in the real estate sector in our country. And I mean, it's in terms of the kind of licenses and the kind of permissions that these builders need to get in order to be able to build uh, any infrastructure projects. For example, the floor space index is kept so low, even in areas where the land prices are skyrocketing. So, because of these reasons, and you see that there are areas around uh, also NCR, and around NCR, and there are other industrial corridors. You see that there's so much scope to, and obviously, as a state, we all recognize that having cities is very important. Having city infrastructure is very, very important. And you still keep the building rights, and you still, you keep them low. You keep the FSI very low. You still have those extreme permits, and you still have, and then there's so much scope for rent seeking everywhere. And all these processes, they're long, they're very expensive. Obviously, you can get through them through bribes, which make them more expensive. So all these reasons actually keep the prices of land so very high. And
Hmm.
when we talk about Gurgaon specifically, uh, it is a great example of how the supply of land was increased by allowing developers to, build a city, make those buildings by easing up those restrictions and by easing up those permits. It's a great example. But at the same time, when you talk about orderly development, when you talk about municipal development, that is where it lagged behind because it was completely left upon these builders. I mean, you gave them a free hand with those permits, but at the same time, nobody checked if the municipal standards are upheld. So that is the kind of problem that exists, and then again, it's just Gurgaon is one example where, uh, there are very limited examples around the state where this is happening. So these permits
Right.
are
Yeah. I mean,
still extremely
thank you
very
for
high. Yes.
thank you for doing that. Because of my existing bias, I am limiting your conversation about Haryana to my vicinity, which is Gurgaon. But I want to know what the condition is in the rest of the state also. So yeah, thanks for pointing that out. But you were saying, so we can continue that.
Yeah, like I said, so Gurgaon was an exception. It's a good example of how, by easing up those, see, that's what I'm saying. If you, that's what, I mean, if they ease up the licenses that are required, if they ease up those restrictions, the supply can be increased. And if that wouldn't have happened, Delhi would, I mean, it would have been such a conundrum in Delhi if Gurgaon was not there. But at the same time, you also have to see that an orderly development is taking place. Not, you
Right.
don't just make those buildings, which is also very important. I mean, increasing the supply is very important in the first place. And then you have to see that the municipal standards are upheld. And so, like I said, that there's in 1991 when the economy, they tried to do away with the license permit quota raj. There still were sectors, especially the real estate sector, where they still upheld those restrictions because, again, land is a sensitive area. But when you are looking to develop your economy and have a developed economy, and when land is such a scarce resource, you have to find ways to balance out those restrictions, and those restrictions aren't just meant, I mean, look at it. If those restrictions were meant to bring about an orderly development, wouldn't Gurgaon have been the most perfect city to be in?
Yeah.
Those restrictions are just, I mean, are just there to prevent builders to build buildings.
You
They're
know,
only, yes,
no, no, go on. Sorry, please.
they're only making it very expensive for builders to make cities. Thus the price of how thus the price of housing is increasing, but in no ways is it improving the orderly development in the city. So those
Yeah.
restrictions aren't seriously meant for orderly development. They're just to make things expensive.
Yeah, you know what? I feel like I think that real estate is probably one of those areas which is arguably even more regulated than it ever was in today's day, because I think post LPG reforms also, the scope to create large private companies who could, double up as builders also increased. So the potential to kind of have this sort of bureaucrat capitalism, as you say, that also increased, because you obviously increase the scope of having so many more builders who could uh, sort of pay their ways into acquiring large tracts of lands, not compensate the original landowners at a decent price. Then they would have the paying capacity to bribe some judges also. And it has happened to the extent that nobody, even within government, will deny these things have happened over the course of, say, the development of the NCR region. I'm not, I'm a capitalist at heart, so I am by no means a critic of big builders or entrepreneurs. I, in fact, I am an admirer of the DLF group also, because of the way such an important private player was able to affect town and planning in a country and an economy where it's the government's bullying that works in town and country planning. I wanted to use a kinder word, but the way town and planning and municipal planning is done in India, it's the government being gangsters. And that's I'm sorry for using this language, but it's you live it and you feel it every day. The longer you interact with this sector, the more refined these opinions get. So over time, I think that there was this interview that I was watching with the journalist Rahul Kanwal and KP Singh, the founder of DLF. And in one part that stuck with me was that at that time, the Haryana chief minister used to repetitively discourage him from taking up any town or country planning projects in this area, because it was just simply beyond his understanding that how can a private organization take up town and country planning. But now I feel like the only parts of Gurgaon which even have some kind of presentability to them are the ones that are developed by DLF. So I think maybe there was a scope for a private public partnership there in development. And I'm talking about PPPs because that's also something I read in your assessment. So my view is that maybe the large developers and the municipal corporations, after easing with a lot of regulations, could have actually worked better in, wastewater management, sewage planning, road construction, improving the build quality of roads. Like we all saw that image of this truck that went into a moon kind of crater just with so much beer, which is like Gurgaon summed up in one picture. But so, do you think there is a scope for private public partnerships, A, in town and country planning and development, and also management of land records? Because I think that's what the focus of your paper was. So sorry for my long rant, but let's just take this conversation in that direction.
Yes. So about public-private partnership in land record management, because you need, if you have good technology for updating your spatial records, that is, I mean, obviously that with boundaries and those records being maintained through great technology works, and there's a huge scope for private players to bring in that technology in terms of maintaining land records. And now coming to the other part of uh, town planning and how private players can work there. There's actually uh, a very well established model, and it has been done across many cities. Brazil is a very good example, and that model is called land value capturing. And my paper also talks about that model. So, land value capturing, basically, it's very simple. It's basically saying that the government should capture a part of the increased value of land, uh, and the value of land which is increased due to the investment that the government made in the infrastructure. So how can the government do that? Basically, this is where that partnership comes in. This is not like the traditional public-private partnership model. It's just that the government, instead of having those restrictive permits and restrictive licenses that the government needs these builders to take, they can actually go ahead and sell uh, building rights to these builders. I mean, in that way, they are capturing a part of. So, for example, there's a road that the government has built, or maybe there's a metro that the government has built, because of which the value of your land increases. So, all this model says is that the government should capture a part of that increased value of land. So now, if the government sells building rights or FSI rights to the builders, I mean, uh, they will have more profit making abilities because they can make now high rise buildings, and the government itself uh, can reinvest those funds into, again, better municipal planning and building more roads and getting, you know building a better infrastructure further without implying very heavily on the government budget itself.
Right.
So yes, and it's not just through selling of those development rights. It's also, levying a fee, maybe a fee that is calculated by themselves. But again, these kinds of models, like I said, because in a state like Haryana, where landowners are so powerful, if they don't see their value, if they don't see them being benefited, their land value being benefited, it's not going to work. So again, with that kind of a model where the government is levying a fee on basis of that, that needs a lot of stakeholder management again. But I feel that selling of development rights is such a great idea where the government can get on board with the big builders and have them uh, build and establish that kind of infrastructure, and again that money only gets reinvested in the municipal planning in that state.
Right. So there's clearly a scope for improving efficiency in the record management and the selling of rights, as you said, through a PPP model. And there's so much more that is required to overhaul. We will need an overhaul in this sector. I don't even want to use the word reform anymore, because people would want to see more private participation in master plan planning. There are smaller cities. If you go to them, uh, anyone who wants to do a business will keep telling you that इस सड़क के पास तक अगले मास्टर प्लान में यहाँ पे ये आ
हाईवे
जाएगा.
बन जाएगा.
And this person has been saying that for the last 10-20 years, like a broken record machine. So master plans are outdated. They need quicker development. Like I said in the last point I was making, that there's scope for privatization even in town and country planning. Now you want to use spatial and GIS data for land record management, because you can probably then pin it down to the last square inch of the land that people own. So, I don't even think that the government has adequate capacity to do this. And if you release space for some involvement of the PPP model to set up, it will generate jobs in the private sector also. But more importantly, it will create a system that works. My critique of the people who advocate privacy rights when a private organization is involved, or they argue that a private company will have access over such sensitive data, my only counter to all that is that the average person does not mind private sector involvement as much as he or she minds a system that does not work anymore. Like take the average, the most important stakeholder in public policy is the beneficiary or the intended beneficiary of a policy. If he is not happy or he or she is not happy with how the system is working, then who are you to say कि वो इसकी data कोई private organization के पास जा रही है and all of that,
If
you
you
know?
if you talk about data, the kind of critique that people might have against private organizations having your data, that same works for the government having your data. I mean, I
Yeah.
think India has
Right.
not reached that level where, I mean, the scare is so huge. But if you look at China and all those countries, even government having a private data is a problem. So that is another set of an issue having your data with the government. I mean, that critique is always there. It's not just
Yeah.
about private players having your data.
Absolutely. And I mean, my other thing is that even this bribery, bureaucrat, capitalism type of point that I was making, my agenda is not to, paint this the average builder as this evil figure who's just here to acquire all this land and generate profits. Like I said, the main issue lies in policy implementation inefficiency. So people will not care if the builders are making profits, as long as the town and country planning allows you to have a breathing space even when the infrastructure might be a little stretched out. That is in principle why I think we need land reform, the types that you have suggested, because I think all these issues are tied into each other. Because if we do better land record management, which is something that you're advocating through your work, we will have a better way to solve these disputes. Then we will have a better way to clear out all the money that's been locked up, and then it goes to development. you know Summer mein Gurgaon can look like LA, or it can look better than LA actually, because even LA is not that great anymore. Or most of Californian cities are also quite dirty and poorly developed now. But it can look better than any Western European city. And now I feel like my villages in Bihar are better off. Like my village in Bihar is better off than Gurgaon at this moment. So you can't have such a extreme variability in your public infrastructure. So sorry, yeah, back to you.
Yeah, so I feel so absolutely any kind of policy to function, having proper land records is necessary. I mean, okay, don't do maybe a land value capturing model, don't do bond system, come up with something new, whatever the government decides, whatever works for the landowners, whatever works for the farmers, even if they want to, further go into, incentivizing agriculture, whatever they want to do, I feel having proper land records is extremely necessary. That's almost like an overarching policy reform that they would need. I mean, without proper land records, I feel even agricultural reforms would not work in the state.
Right.
So just start. I mean, there has to be a starting point, right? So you have to first. I mean, if you look at the existing policy or if you look at the status quo, I mean, obviously the government identifies these problems. The government identifies the fact that agriculture is not able to bring the kind of output that so much input, uh, should get, or the prices of land is skyrocketing. Urban infrastructure is not great. So, I mean, yes, the government acknowledges that they have policies in place, but until and unless your existing records, your existing institutions aren't able to handle the existing disputes, nothing can work in future until and unless the investment that has been halted for so long, nothing can work until and unless people are not confident that whatever land is being, because at the end of the day, it's their land. If they see that with any policy, with any government investment, the value of their land is increasing, they would not have a problem. But until and unless you're not sure that, oh, this piece of land belongs to you, uh, nothing can work really. So I think that's mostly like an overarching policy intervention that is
Right.
needed. Yes.
I'm so passionate about this issue that I can go on for hours about this. But I will begin to, start taking your and my concluding thoughts. I have had an idea that I want to very passionately talk about all the town and country planning issues multiple times on my platform. My last feature also I did on poor traffic, because every time you get stuck in a jam in Delhi NCR, a part of you wants to think, especially as a self-identifying policy wonk or whatever, no matter how arrogant that sounds, but you feel like you want to try to at least talk about some interventions or whatever. So I will just say a little bit of my conclusive thoughts, then I'll get some of yours. And I will leave a scope for us to have these conversations on this platform again in the future. So I will invite you again very soon. But my simple take about doing any kind of agriculture or land reform takes me back to the point that we had about, say, uh, agricultural reforms in Haryana. We know that Haryana is growing a lot of water intensive crops. For that, we need farmers who are a little entrepreneurial and risk taking to come and do crop diversification. कि भाई देखो मैं इतने ही स्पेस में धान उगाऊंगा क्योंकि मेरी assured income है, but now I want to maybe try growing some horticulture crops which may be suitable for my piece of land in Haryana, or I just want to, grow a crop which is not eating into my groundwater tables. You need a farmer hypothetically who's entrepreneurial and more risk taking, who's not a farmer who's dependent on government to release a certain number of funds every time you need money. And in that system, how do you encourage risk taking if most farmers are dealing with land disputes and fragmentation of land parcels? So the appetite for risk is also eaten up by poor existing titling. So these all issues are so badly tied into each other that even if a person had that risk taking ability, poor land record management, poor judicial delays, the lack of our ability to create good outcomes in this area take that risk taking ability away from the farmer. That's why the farmer kind of gets stuck in this trap of living at the mercy of the government programs that acquire your crops at those MSPs or whatever. So those are my concluding thoughts. Reforms need to be bold, and they need to start now. Is my take. So I'll just get your concluding thoughts, Yashika.
Yes, so I'll just add on to what you said. Exactly, the existing land disputes, so much confusion about land titling. All this takes away the risk-taking ability of the farmers. And at the same time, if you somehow encourage a farmer to, move out of farming, which is again like an economic problem in itself. If you encourage them to somehow move out of farming, find better means of employing their land, employing the piece of their land, the alternatives are so expensive. If you move out of your land, if you move to a city, the prices of housing is so high. So you have to be able to create the kind of alternatives for the farmers to first, yes, I mean, if you are involved in farming, make sure that make sure that everything that the farmer is doing, at least at the end of the day, they don't have to contest their rights for that land. And if you're trying to get the farmer to move out of agriculture, you have better alternatives in place. You have better, uh, you know, you have builders and investors, they have the kind of confidence to invest in their pieces in their land, so that at the end of the day, the landowners, the farmers, they get the kind of confidence that the income that they're able to earn from that piece of land, it's huge. Because right now they feel that just leaving their land barren, just leaving their land uncropped, not having any infrastructure projects, and that actually they feel is better than having some builder come in. So yes, the policy should look at creating better alternatives to move out of agriculture. And even if somebody chooses to be in agriculture, it should ensure that uh, agriculture is able to get the kind of output, so that at the end of the day, people care about their incomes increases. And if the policies are able to look into that, uh, I think things can change a bit. But yes, there's a long way to go because land is extremely sensitive. Yes.
Yeah. So I guess there is hope, but the it lies beyond a sustained policy reform campaign for it to be implemented. I think we will definitely have to continue this conversation in another one of our features. So I think this episode we can pause here today. Thank you so much for joining us, Yashika. My brother couldn't join us because he's on he's on baby duty, but but yeah, we will do another feature of this at some point very soon, because I'm deeply passionate about these conversations. Thank you so much for taking the time to explain what you've been working on.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Right.